Hello, everyone, and welcome to our event, The Role of Storytelling in Genocide Remembrance. This event is organized by the Alliance Against Genocide, Nobody's Listening, a project of YAZDA, the Assyrian Policy Institute, Digital Culture Heritage Research Center, Suleimani Polytechnic University, and our Nareen Network partners. Over the next hour, we will hear from our panelists on the current situation in Iraq and discuss survivor stories as avenues for advocacy, genocide prevention, and accountability. We will have time for audience questions at the end, so please type any questions you have into the comment section. Please remember to keep all comments and questions respectful. This recording of the event will remain on YouTube, so please feel free to share among your networks. Now, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Tabitha Mpamira. Tabitha is a therapist, activist, motivational speaker, and consultant whose work centers on the intersection between transforming and transferring the trauma across generations. Tabitha is the founder of the EDJA, a program that combats sexual and gender-based violence in Uganda, and an educator of global communities committed to end cycles of sexual and gender-based violence. Tabitha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, everyone. Welcome. Such an important conversation. I'm honored and blessed to be part of these amazing individuals that you're going to hear from today. So before we start, as you heard about this, we're going to hear people storytelling, the importance of that, and the work that they do is so personal from their own experiences. So, and as a result, sometimes can be traumatizing, triggering. It takes a lot of courage to share your own story of trauma in order to bring about change. So before we start, I just want to invite everybody, wherever you are, to just take 1 second to feel your chair, feet on the ground. Let's ground ourselves. If you feel comfortable, maybe put your hand on your heart, another one on your stomach. Let's just do 2 breaths so that whenever we're triggered, if we're hearing things that are getting us out of our body, we can come back to this place. So just with me, let's take a quick 2 deep breaths. Breathe in. Let's do 1 more together. Breathe in. All right. So thanks again for coming. Welcome into this space. And we're going to have our panelists just have a few minutes telling us a little bit about themselves as I introduce them. And then we will jump into them telling us about their stories. So I will introduce, I'm excited to meet these wonderful, wonderful women. So our first panelist that I will introduce is Stephanie Youssef. And she serves on the board of directors of the Assyrian Policy Institute, where she's active in organizational planning and decision-making, as well as providing innovative advice with dynamic perspectives on API initiatives and activities. She's a community organizer. I told you these people are amazing, with a passion for international justice and minority rights. She has years of experience working with nonprofits, leading community-based initiatives. She's born in Chicago, Illinois, to Assyrian parents from Iraq. Stephanie has traveled to northern Iraq, where she's firsthand seen the devastating impacts of ISIS. So they're not only experts at what they do, but they have firsthand experience on the pain and the struggles that have come out of genocide. She's a graduate of Iowa University. She holds a bachelor's degree in philosophy and religious studies, and currently completing her master's degree. I don't know how you do it all, Stephanie, but welcome. And I will also quickly go, well, I'll have Stephanie give us, she will go first. I'll just introduce everybody at once, and then let them tell us more about themselves. The next one is Dr. Rozhen Kamal Mohammed Amin, and she's an architect, an academic, with interdisciplinary background and research interests in the confluence of digital technology, architecture, and cultural heritage. If you're like me, I know nothing what any of those words mean. They just sound really impressive. She's the founding head of the Digital Culture Heritage Research Group at the Suleimani Polytechnic University. She's also a lecturer at its City Planning Engineering Department. These women are just rocking the world. Rozhen serves as secretary of Rashid, an international network dedicated to safeguarding. She's also, they're part of the ECOSOC, the UN Consultative Status. I can't say everything they do. We'll be here all day, but I want to just highlight. Before she completed her master's and PhD at the University of Calgary in Canada, she also worked at the State Organization of Tourism and Ministry. So she is just has interests and expertise all over the place. Her research includes digital cultural heritage, museum experience design, virtual reality, and technologies in public and cultural heritage spaces like museums and historic sites. Thank you, Dr. Rozhen, for joining us. You will meet all of them as we go. And last but definitely not least is Vian Darwish. She's currently the coordinator of the Yazidi Survivors Network at YAZDA, which is a network. It's a global Yazidi network which supports survivors of genocide and sexual enslavement committed by ISIS. Prior to this, Vian worked as a coordinator and documenter in YAZDA's documentation project, which gathers information on the Islamic States and the crimes against Yazidis in August 2014. In that role, Vian spoke to many, many survivors of the ISIS, especially female survivors. When, as we all know, women suffer as a different aspect of as a result of genocide. So Vian has extensive knowledge about the Yazidi genocide, and she has received trainings on interviewing techniques, implementation of SGBV crimes, and documentation, which is really difficult work to do. She's worked as a volunteer for NGOs, for equality rights, for democracy, and she wants to build capacity in continuing to support and empower ISIS survivors, especially in their advocacy work. Wow. I'm excited to present to you our panel today of these very much accomplished and survivors and activists who do everything. So we will open it up and have Stephanie, if you don't mind, kind of telling us a little bit about yourself and how you do your work in this space.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Tabitha. Like Tabitha said, my name is Stephanie Youssef. I serve on the board of directors at the Assyrian Policy Institute. And I really kind of want to start off by saying thank you to Genocide Watch and the Alliance Against Genocide for putting together this wonderful event. The API is so deeply proud to be a part of this incredible coalition of organizations that is so mobilized against genocide. So thank you. I also want to quickly acknowledge my colleague and fellow panelist here, Vian, for the amazing work that the Yazidi Survivors Network and YAZDA are doing in the aftermath of the Yazidi genocide. It's an honor to be among these incredible women who are doing vitally important work to be a part of this panel today. It's really crucial that we create this space for these types of discussions. We were really focused on survivors and those that have been affected by not just ISIS related atrocities, but also by genocidal persecution that has unfortunately spanned decades, and unfortunately in the case of Assyrians, a century, right? We've kind of seen these waves of genocide there. So again, very, very crucial work. I was thinking a little bit today about the theme and sort of what this event is really aiming to accomplish, and that's how do we fit in, or where do survivor stories sort of fit into the overall genocide narrative? And after some thought, I think this is something kind of we all already know, right? It's something we demonstrate every single day in our work, and that's precisely in the middle. Survivor stories have to be the driving force behind any and all discussions. They have to be the driving force behind any conversation about justice. They have to be the driving force behind any conversation about reconciliation. And this is ultimately why the Assyrian Policy Institute was founded. We realized early on, specifically with the aftermath of ISIS, that there were so many conversations happening about how to respond to the crisis, what the future for Assyrians and Yazidis and other minority communities would look like. And yet the voices of these communities were completely bypassed and overlooked. As a matter of fact, there were other groups speaking for these communities without any sort of meaningful engagement first. And it became a lot of being told what they needed in order to heal, in order to survive, as opposed to listening to what these communities were feeling and what they were saying that they needed. And so the API was founded really in response to this. So to center the voices, it's in our mission statement. It's what we've always aimed to do. Our goal has and always will be to amplify the Assyrian voice that has again and again been impacted by not just ISIS, but other human rights abuses. And making sure those voices are inserted where traditionally they are at best being ignored and at worst being suppressed. And so documentation is a huge part of what we do, and it requires a lot of on-the-ground engagement with survivors and different members of the Assyrian community. It's personable work. We collect these stories, we document them, and then do our best to make sure that they are heard so as to provide validity to a response, right? Another major facet of our work is advocacy. We've garnered so much enthusiasm as a team, as a community, and so we sort of have this newfound responsibility to really align ourselves with policies that reflect our values. And one of those is to make sure that those survivor stories are at the center. And so it's quite logical, really, to understand that people are not formulas. We all have an inherent need to be seen and to be heard. And so to come full circle with this, centering the survivor story is not just dignifying, but it's practical. And so to conclude here, I think I've got just about 5 minutes, and perhaps I've gone over it by now, but I just really want to emphasize the harm that's caused when those survivor stories are left out of the conversation, and other groups and stakeholders' perspectives are prioritized. In the case of the Assyrians, and I'll just speak on them, ultimately it's led to a situation where 7 years after the ISIS takeover of Nineveh, survivors are still unable to come home. The security situation is still incredibly fragile, and there is lasting devastation. And so this is what happens when survivor stories are left out, and other stakeholders are driving the conversation based on their priorities and interests. We simply don't see progress. And so I'm really looking forward to hear everybody else's intros and to kind of get to know everybody else's work as well. So thank you so much, Tabitha.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thanks for that. As validation, right? Seeing and hearing people and not doing anything for survivors without survivors. Wow, powerful. Their voice, narrative, and that's what Genocide Watch, if we're going to prevent this from happening again, we have bear witness and hear these stories. Thanks for that, Stephanie. Now I'll invite Vian, please, to share 5 minutes of how you do this work in survival-led work in these organizations in order to bring prevention, recognition, and then accountability.
Thank you, Stephanie, for your briefing about your work and what you are doing. It's really impressive. First of all, I'm just whenever there is any occasion, any event, any panel discussion, anything, when there is a woman around, I feel so proud. I feel so empowered, and I feel inspired and proud to be among those ladies who can lead. And just like the panel of today, so I'm so honored and glad to be among you ladies, and it's really a pleasure for me to be a part of this panel. So just I mean, I didn't prepare anything for this panel discussion, and I was thinking whatever comes to my mind and to my heart, I will just share with the panelists and who's watching us. So basically, we are the work that we are doing in YAZDA is I mean, we have so many different projects and so many like areas that we are working in, but basically with survivors, we have like two main like fields to work with them directly. The first one is case management, which is providing them like medical, PSS, financial, and any kind of support they need. But unfortunately, because of the fund, the project was over like recently. And the other part that we are working directly with survivors, which is the most like important one, is documentation project, and also within the like with documentation we have advocacy and survivors Yazidi network. It's very important to work on the documentation to help survivors to tell their stories, to share their testimonies, to speak loud, to raise their voice, because first of all, this is also a part of healing. If they want, like, if we want to help them to get healed, or to engage with the community again, to not having their previous lives, but at least like to have a normal life, we need to listen. Like, we have to listen to them, and we have to like open the space for them to talk, because only sharing the stories is let's say is the key. It's the key for many things. First of all, for not only for survivors, but all of the community, is the key to have justice, to have I mean, through justice, when there is justice, there will be reconciliation, there will be peace building, there will be social cohesions, and then this is like very important to help the survivors to tell their stories, so not only for the survivors themselves, but also for the community and all the religious and different ethnical and even like different religious groups. So with documentation project, we are documenting ISIS crimes committed against the Yazidi survivors, but not the Yazidis and the other minorities in Iraq and Syria, and we help them to, I mean, as much as we can to cooperate with the prosecutors from the from different places in the world, such as Germany, such as France and US, Sweden, Netherlands, and some many other countries to contribute to have like justice for those survivors and for the community as well. Also, so we are doing this by interviewing those survivors, by giving them the space to share their stories, to share their testimonies in a very like professional and like international standards of interviewing. The other part is to work on the advocacy, especially with the Yazidi Survivors Network, which is like a network founded by YAZDA, and it contains, or it has, members from Yazidi survivors from different places outside Iraq, inside Iraq, and they are empowered and trained to work on advocacy, like advocacy for their own rights, and the other survivors from other communities who are unfortunately in Iraq, they are not like supported, or they don't have this support from their communities to speak loud, to advocate for their own rights, to I mean, to share their stories. So they have like some limits, let's say, or some obstacles of doing this. That's why the Yazidi survivors, they are taking the lead and advocating for their own rights, and the other survivors from the other minorities. And this is what happened with the when the Iraqi president drafted a draft bill law for the Yazidi survivors. So the Yazidi survivors, especially the YSN members or the Yazidi Survivors Network members, they did a great job with contributing to make like amendments, changes, and include survivors from other communities within this law. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah. So so this is like in terms of advocacy and justice, and now also the Yazidi survivors, they are survivors network. They are working on, because unfortunately now when you talk to any survivor, for example, yesterday I met a survivor. We were like talking. So the sentence, like she said me a sentence, it kept in my mind. She said, I will not, like, I lost my husband and my children. I will feel safe or feel like at least comfortable if the ones who did this crimes against them, they were punished or they were sentenced to the justice. So that's why justice is very important. That's why it's a part of healing. And unfortunately, in Iraq, we don't have any trails, any like attempts to help those survivors to get justice that they want, the justice they need. The like, they don't want ISIS members to be prosecuted in only as like they are joining like a terrorist organization, but they want them to be sentenced or punished according to the crimes they committed against them, the other minorities, and the other people also, such as genocide crimes, war crimes, and crimes against humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the justice they want. They don't want them like just because they don't want to get only revenge. They don't need revenge. They need to be healed. They need when someone raped a survivor, like, to be punished according to that crime, not because he was joining a terrorist organization. And this is one of the reasons also we cannot cooperate with the Iraqi authorities or the jurism bodies in Iraq, because like whatever, because the evidence that we are gathering, they will be used only like for this like this crime, and it will not be used for the other crimes.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so that's why survivors, they are now working with UNITAD, working with the who is also doing investigations in Iraq on the crimes, ISIL, let's say ISIL crimes in Iraq, but also they cannot use their evidence and the information they gather because of the Iraqi law. So the KRG, they drafted a draft bill law for having special trails, for ISIL fighters. Now the Yazidi survivors, they are eager to work on this, to advocate for this law, and also if it was by the Iraqi government to be adopted and to have special trials, so that they reach and they have the justice they want, not the other justice that it's only the justice it's provided for them.
Not the justice that people want, but it's one that they do. So I actually want to come back to that during questions. There are a couple points you really made about healing and how justice is not working the way that people would have wanted. Let's have Dr. Rozhen tell us a little bit about her work, and then we'll come back and hear more about that piece, because it's very important around, and the reason we do the storytelling, right? So we can have that healing. We know that we repeat what we don't repair, and we can't repair what we don't talk about. And so that was a really great point, Vian, and we will come back to that during our questions and answers. So Dr. Rozhen, can you tell us in maybe 5 minutes or so a little bit about your work and how you approach advocacy and survivor-led work? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the introduction, Tabitha. It's always a great honor and actually pleasure to be sharing a panel with these achieving and very inspiring women. So before I actually dive into talking about the Nobody's Listening project that our center had the honor of getting involved with a few months ago, I would like just to start briefly mentioning about the role of storytelling in general. But before that, can I check, do you see my screen, please?
I do.
Okay, excellent. So as we just heard from Stephanie and Vian about their stories, we just heard stories. So actually we get to know most of what we learn about, and actually we remember or even imagine is coming from storytelling. And storytelling just by its nature, be it in the form of text or image or even words, they are keeping and continuing to connect us to past events, people, and also locations. And so in that regard, they are also helping us to understand our current days or our present, and also imagining our future. So I always say, like stories is about making an image about anything in our head. So, but then when it comes about, we talk about stories, the clarity is really important. How clear is that picture for us? So, and that's when the power of how you communicate it comes in, which relates to the kind of work we do at DCH, at Digital Cultural Heritage Research Center, and the SPO office of the Nahrain Network. So basically, that clarity is really affected by the medium through which that story is communicated. And virtual reality, or VR, also known as VR, is actually becoming an effective tool for storytelling. Many of the stories that has been communicated could be actually communicated in VR. And being called the empathy machine, known as the empathy machine, what differentiates virtual reality-based storytelling from traditional way of storytelling is actually adding the immersion and also presence, sense of presence in that, to a point that it actually creates that sense of you are inside that story, you are not an outsider, but it actually puts you in the shoes of that another person to actually see the story and from that point of view. And of course, that contributes to more sensory engagement, as well as it deepens the storytelling experience in itself. And these characters are really critical and important for communicating about stories like genocide, the Yazidi genocide. And that's because getting closer, to the depth, getting closer to the stories and getting into the depths of the stories help us to actually see much more than the images where the world are becoming desensitized about it, unfortunately. And it actually even helps us to create more emotional engagement with it, have more emotional engagement, and develop more empathy toward those stories. And it is well established in research that the more you have emotional engagement, the more you have increased empathy toward a cause or toward a story, let's put it that way, then there is more chance for pro-social actions and support. This is something which is very critical to many of the things that Vian Khan just mentioned about. You need justice, reconciliation, healing, all require support and from the surrounding communities and others. And these could be triggered or even encouraged through empathy, through increasing empathy, which you can do through emotional storytelling and immersive story experiences. And in that regard, Nobody's Listening project is kind of an attempt, is a project that actually using virtual reality technology to communicate and raise awareness about the Yazidi genocide and to tell people what's the case of the Yazidis and how their life is currently. The project was initiated by Ryan D'Souza, who is a human rights advocate, and developed as a collaboration between YAZDA and Surround Vision Company in the UK. The project very effectively combined art, culture, and technology to dive its user deep inside the Yazidi genocide and the destruction of their cultural heritage. And in that regard, it's like a sensitive way of revealing the untreated wounds and the very deep wounds of the Yazidi community and other minorities in Iraq who had struggled under ISIS and who have experienced genocide. It uses, because of time, I won't be able to dive into details, but just very quickly, it actually combined digital reconstruction, 360 video to create that sense of immersion, combining with emotional narration, sound effect, and also animation to show and tell in engaging and emotional way the stories of these people. The project, nobody's listening. Several months ago, we got the honor and privilege of joining a growing team of partners like this to actually undertake a large-scale assessment of the Nobody's Listening virtual reality exhibition. And we undertook data collection across 5 cities. Again, because of time, I won't go into detail, but very quickly show you three findings which we found through that assessment, which was reaction to it, just to put it in 2 words, was overwhelming and very emotional, in a sense that it generated a very high cognitive impact and engagement. As you can see from that, this is one of the very, only one example of many of the statements, strong statements we had on indication about high cognitive engagement and changing knowledge and impression. We notice many of the people, it is our local people who are in the community, but we notice that there has been a significant change in their knowledge and past impression about the Yazidi community, as you can see from this feedback. And lastly, we noticed also a high emotional engagement and empathy, an increase in a way that people, like I said, reacted to the storytelling through that immersion way. Many of them were talking about how they have been seeing in video, in TV and news, but it was nothing like actually stepping inside the stories. And of course, there are much more details and much more finding that you are welcome to, and I highly recommend reading the report that's publicly available on IOM website here. And in summary, immersive storytelling is really important, powerful, and important medium to connect and actually pull us closer to the genocide of the Yazidis and also other genocide causes. And for that, it's really important to elicit emotion and empathy in sensitive and engaging ways, so that hopefully that will inspire more action. And I just wanted to use this last slide to actually acknowledge the very wonderful people and supportive people who have supported this mass-scale data collection for the project. Because of time, I won't be able to name them individually, but these individual and also organization have greatly played a role in undertaking that assessment. And we are, like I mentioned, very privileged to have been involved with this project and contributing to the knowledge about the role of immersive storytelling in engaging with difficult heritage and genocide storytelling. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you. I mean, how creative is that? And amazing. We all know when the brain is not wanting to engage, the cognitive dissonance, we all tend to do this, like our brains just disconnect from our prefrontal cortex. And what a really great way of bringing people into these conversations and storytelling. As a Rwandan, we also experienced that genocide, and storytelling was really one way to find healing. And all of you, the work you're doing in your communities, I know people who are listening here want to know, how can we not only hear the stories and witness that pain, how can we be part of the solution, led by survivors, led by people on ground who understand this like you all? So my question to you all, and I'll start with Stephanie, what are some of the largest problems that your community faces, or the communities you represent that face? And maybe we'll do a couple minutes or so. Obviously, this is such a big conversation. We wish we had maybe 5 hours to really get in. So I know I'm not doing justice to all the incredible work you're doing by rushing, but we also want to honor people's time. So maybe in a couple, up to 3 minutes each, can you tell us some of the problems that your community is facing?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to the other panelists for those introductions. Fantastic work that you guys are all doing. I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward, and it's something that we kind of already know, is that, and it's, the work of Dr. Rozhen, it's that really nobody's listening, right? And oftentimes the people who they are listening to, or feel like they should listen to are voices that have that are being co-opted, right? And so, this is kind of, one of the recommendations, I guess, conversation that, I wanted to mention this too, but verifying that the sources that you're listening to and getting your information from is so vitally important, right? Making sure that these are actually representative of the community that we're working for. So I feel like in terms of the Assyrian community, at least, that's sort of something that we've seen be an issue, a barrier, right, to real progress, is really not getting accurate information about the community, not having a clear idea of what exactly these people need, and so really going straight to the source on the ground is so crucial. And so I think for us, that's been definitely a hurdle, for real progress.
Oh, wow. And a quick question somebody put in the chat for you before I go to Vian. Somebody's wondering, how are these stories retained over time that your organization, how are these stories retained over time? What methodologies do you use with the survivor stories?
Yep. So how are these retained over time?
Oh, thank you.
Oh, perfect. Love that. Yep. So we, like I said, on the ground work, you'll catch us with, our recorders, and we'll just record these conversations, take the time to transcribe them and sort of put them word for word in our reports. So we've published reports on specifically, survivor stories, and the fact that they haven't been fitting into the conversation on progress last year. And so making sure that they are heard, they are word for word, quoted, right? This is exactly what they're saying. This is exactly what they're asking for. And so it's really kind of like, some of the most critical work is making sure that it's documented. So making sure that these stories are heard and that they're documented, so that we can go back and say, we made it a point to listen to these people, and we asked them specifically what they needed, and this is exactly what they said. So documenting them by way of reports, publishing those reports, and making them accessible, right? Working with organizations where we can translate them so that they are accessible in other countries and other languages, so that there is a greater awareness. Huge part of what we do. Thank you for that question.
Oh, I'm muted. Thank you. Thank you all for engaging. And yes, because I can't remember who said this. I think it was Maya Angelou. There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. Then you all are helping these survivors really overcome, in addition to everything they've endured. We'll go to Vian in a couple minutes or two. Can you tell us about kind of the largest problems the community is facing, so that our listeners can try to figure out a way how they can be of support? How can they bear witness to the people who are experiencing this?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I will try as much as mention, because the challenge, I can mention like the basic challenges, because if we talk about the challenges, we have so many. The current situation of the survivors, but also the current situation of the Yazidi displaced people who are not able to go back, to return to their areas because of many reasons, such as the security, safety, the lack of the uh, life condition services, which are not available in their homes. Also, the urgent needs of the survivors who are waiting for the implementation of the um, Yazidi survivors law, which will take time, and it was adopted before 7 months, and still they have no they didn't receive anything from their rights of reparations that will be provided for them by this law. But I will go to another challenge, and I will speak about a challenge that the community, or the communities, not only the Yazidi communities, they face in Iraq, which is the awareness, being aware about the other different groups, and being aware about the different religious groups who are living in Kurdistan and in Iraq and Kurdistan. They are very rich with the different religious groups, but unfortunately, we are not aware about each other. We don't accept each other. We feel like if someone is not from our kind, is not like he deserves to what is happening to him, and this is we really need to face this challenge to change this point of views of people on each other. And this is why I will go back to nobody's listening VR that Professor Rozhen talked about before. This VR is very important for raising awareness about the Yazidis, but also it's a good way to about the Yazidi genocide, but not only the genocide, also about like the Yazidi community, and it helps to educate people about how the Yazidis. I mean, I am a Yazidi. In August 2014, I was in Shingal, just like thousands, hundreds of thousands of Yazidis. I ran away and we came to Kurdistan. I have been like through the stages of I mean, if not all of them, but some stages of this genocide. But when I saw the VR, it showed me like a new the Yazidi genocide from different angles, and I was like thinking, oh my God, that happened, and I was there. So it's really like putting us in the shoes of those people who were in Kocho and in other places. That's why it's very important um, people be aware about what happened, not only for Yazidis, but only also for the um, other communities, which like will be a way also to prevent future genocides against anyone, like any religious group in Iraq or in other like in the world. So this is a challenge we need all together to work on as individuals, not as decision makers. As like we can like raise awareness as much as we can, and we can like motivate ourselves, our families, our communities, our people to accept each other. And if someone is not from our kind, that means like he's he's wrong or whatever. Thank you for your question. I think I will stop here.
Wow, thank you so much for that offering. Yes, I mean stories, right? I never remember names, so forgive me, but I love quotes. So somebody said stories are the currency of humanity, right? So there would be no economy of how to keep humanity going unless we share our experiences. And that VR sounds like it brings us into that experience that our fellow sisters and brothers across have experienced. So that brings me to Dr. Rozhen. Tell us a little bit of what is the largest problem that you have faced doing this work in your community?
Yes, actually, what I could say during the assessment, we were assessing and actually observing the largest problem, and that's as to echo Vian Khan as on what she mentioned. Actually, it's local awareness. So you would assume that people who have lived in Iraq might have had better exposure to the stories and might have more insight about what was happening, but then even the stories themselves, the way they were told, the way, I mean, I think when it comes to storytelling, details really matter. And when I say detail, I'm talking about not just the detail of an event, but also the emotions and the way people are feeling. So one of the biggest thing we noticed that we were surprised that far many locals were not aware about many of the things that were mentioned in the VR experience. And it is only a 12-minute experience. So it's not even an exclusive list of all what the Yazidi people have gone through. It's just like a tip of an iceberg. So on that regard, I think local awareness is really a big issue, and it is a risking, associated with social cohesion and building long-lasting peace. And peace building in general as a whole process. And then I remember something that once Vian Khan mentioned to me, and I think that also speaks to one of the other big challenges here. I think because now the ISIS has been at least officially been removed from those areas, so the general assumption that's coming that everything is fine now. But then the problem, I think, one important thing is to do is with this constant reminder and storytelling is actually to show to that it's not the pains and the pain is still the wound is still bleeding. The pain is even bigger. So people need to be aware about that. And that's what Vian Khan once mentioned, saying that someone once mentioned that people think now it's okay to live in that tent, which is just a piece of cloth in heat and cold of that area that they live in. So I mean, it's something. It's humanity nature that by nature we forget things after a while. But I think storytelling is really playing a critical role in reminding people in a sensible way and in a way that connect people, because storytelling people can relate to each other. That's when you make something relevant. I recently read an article about saying one of the reasons that people sometimes don't help each other is that they cannot connect with people. They see it as me and other. But then how to do that? You have to develop empathy. And that's where storytelling, emotional storytelling, and the power of sometimes you harness the power of technology and some other mediums. You have to do it in a responsible and sensitive way to actually address some of these challenges on a mass scale and not only for a few people.
Wow, absolutely. Because we think a lot of us, and we know it's our brain trying to keep us safe or trying to live out. We hear all these tragedies happening across the world and we zone out, right? We don't want to engage. We think somebody else got it. We forget they're real humans going through this day in and day out. And as you said, even when the crisis is done, that's really when the hard work begins, the healing. Thank you, both of you, for sharing, and Vian for sharing your story. I know that it's not easy, but each and every one of you do this so that people do not forget what is happening. And what we each can do at the very least is create space for others who have gone through such tragedies so they can share, so we can validate, we can see you and hear you. And I think that's what I keep hearing all of you say. Telling these stories validates the experience that they're going through. And there's one takeaway thing. How can you create space for someone who's experienced such tragedy to share and feel seen and heard? We ran out of time so fast. So before we do, if anybody has a question, you can drop it in there. But I want to come back to all of you. And we'll come back to you, Stephanie, first. If you have maybe 2 recommendations, what recommendations do you have on how to center survivor voices in genocide remembrance? That is where the key is. But this never happened again. We have to continue hearing what is happening, what has happened, and how can you do it. If you have about 2 recommendations on how to center survivor voices in this work, please share with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Am I echoing? No? Okay, maybe it's just me. Yeah, I think a couple recommendations I would have, to really make sure that these voices are heard. The first one I'd say is to really make sure that when we are listening and when we've granted somebody this space to talk about their perspectives and their experiences, I think all of us are guilty of this. Sometimes we almost listen to respond, and we don't truly listen to get their experience, right? And so, and as storytellers, as people, right, we have practice, making sure that our emotions are communicated across. And so, on the receiving end, we need to make sure that we're, sort of like shedding any preconceived biases that we have about communities or about a certain, group of people. And so really listening to listen, right? Can I walk away feeling like I understand this person's emotion and the way that they felt during this experience, and not just on the surface, like what happened, right? Because we can read that, we know what happened, but what did this do? What was an emotional sort of byproduct of this experience for this person or for this group of people? I think that's so critical to do as listeners, and it's something that we all really need practice on. I'm guilty of it too. Another recommendation I would say, and this is really geared towards allies and support groups, people who sort of like align themselves with victims, is if an ally has a platform or a medium, I would say consider sharing that with the victim and with the survivor, right? I think a lot of times, we see this all the time. Journalists will interview a survivor and sort of repackage sort of the experience in their own way. And so that can sort of take away from the experience. And so consider, giving that platform away instead of, I don't want to use the word repackage again, but really kind of like putting their own twist on it, right? So these op-eds where it's like, an interview, and this was sort of the takeaway. Let's put the whole interview in there. Let's hear, word for word, verbatim. Let's quote these survivors, and let's try to incorporate as much emotion as we can. I know that can kind of be hard, via words and verbiage, but I don't think that it's impossible, and I think that it's something that we can all strive to be better at. So those would be the two.
Wow, thank you. Yes, listening to listen, and that is something we all can work on, right? In letting the voice be heard the way it is, and its authentic self, not the way we want to hear it. Well, thank you for that. Vian, what would be a couple of recommendations that you would give to keep that survivor focus?
Yeah, so just a small comment on what Stephanie said. It's very important to be good listeners, to listen to them and so my recommendation, it will be like a part of what Stephanie mentioned, is not to judge on them. Many survivors, many people, they are afraid to talk, to tell their story because of the judgment, because they are not feeling that safe. The people who interview them, the people who is in front of them, the listener, how they will judge on that person. So that's also, it's an obstacle on them. I remember one of the interviews I did with one of the children. He said there was an ISIS fighter. He was good, but I am scared to say he was good with me. I am scared to say because of my family. They don't want me to say this because they think there is no ISIS fighter is good. But we have to as like listeners to give that person the safety, the inner safety and security, that there will be no judgment on them. If you saw that ISIS fighter was good for you, then it's okay. He might did something good for you. I was not there. I didn't experience how he was dealing with you. So it will be judgment, and also something is very important for the for me as a recommendation is to manage the expectations of the people who are telling their stories. Nobody's listening was named with this name, because when you talk to any survivor, they will say, we are talking, we are saying everything, we are telling our stories, but there is no one is listening to us. So it's very important to manage their expectations. You will tell me your story, but this might be happened. I can help you with this. I can support you with this, but with this not. So it is really about managing the expectations. If they were financial expectations, if it was legal expectations, if it was like any kind of expectations expectations regarding the advocacy, decision making, anything. We really need to manage their expectations while they talk to us. And also I will add only as like another recommendation is to motivate those if those survivors, let's say, or even not survivors, to talk, to say their stories, because we have so many people, they are scared, they are afraid, and they feel embarrassed to share their stories. So I think this is something it will be important to work on it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'll just jump right into Dr. Rozhen. That is incredible, letting the survivors feel safe and not judged. And back to our listening skills as a society, we just lost those skills that we have to come back to provide space for healing. Dr. Rozhen, what would be your recommendations? And I have another question after this.
Sure. Actually, one of the main thing, and to echo Vian and Stephanie on their excellent point they made, it's very important. And you mentioned that, you very rightly put it, creating a space, but then having that space a safe space, a non-judgmental. And to make that, actually, to achieve that, it's really important to raise mass awareness, especially local awareness among the communities, and also keep advocating and empowering the Yazidi people to actually be able to say what they feel, and also to make people listeners, active listeners, like what Stephanie mentioned. Because what's the point of actually having an empowered Yazidi talk about them, but then it falls into what they call deaf ears, right? So you definitely need to work on the same level at the same time. And my second recommendation is actually simply moving from theory to practice, because far many things are happening here. Like there are, media coverage and everything is happening. And that's why I think sometimes, like Vian Khan very rightfully mentioned about managing expectation, but that's actually happening some of the time is because the people, the donors or the authorities, the embassies, everyone else, they feel and they did support us. But for individuals' life, many of these things has not been translated. It's moving from theory into practice for them individually. So it's actually time to make that changes in some sense of, keeping things actually affecting, like, having these initiation, which are wonderful, but much more need to be done to actually make a change in a Yazidi life, to be able to feel like someone is listening to them.
Wow, yes, and all of it. Incredible. We have to do this again for longer because you all have so much to offer. And Gail, you just asked a really great question that is big, and we have 2 minutes. I'm going to have one person jump in and see if we can do this. How can regional or cultural divisions be bridged through storytelling? Oh, that's a good one. All right, we'll see how we can do this. Stephanie, you want to give a go at it, and then everybody get a minute? You all can hang on for a couple minutes, right?
This is a good one. I would say, it can be so hard, right, when somebody's the other, the capital O other, right? They're different, and so it can be kind of hard to even want to build a bridge. And so I think the way to do that is really through emotion, right? And sort of the pathos, the ethos of a conversation, right? Engaging with that and understanding that they are human. And that there's so, especially in our region of the world, we are so much more alike than we are different. And so remembering that can really sort of help grease the runway, if you will, for true allyship.
Oh, beautifully said. All right. Anybody else want to jump in to answer that question?
Okay. In history education, normally they do this through what they call historical empathy. So trying to see through a perspective of someone else, and then you start to understand some of the points, because normally we are in our own silo, our cultural silo, personal silo, or even ego, so that we don't see the other perspective. But then when we come out of that and try to see and expose ourselves, there are very interesting ways of doing that. But then the minute you do that, then people start to see things from a different way, a different angle, and that is really powerful on at least loosening divisions, or at least loosening some of those strong barriers different cultures among cultures, and also in general exposing people to good examples and good causes.
Yes, thank you. Vian, are you able to add on for a minute?
Yeah, so I mean, there is no there's no too much to add to what Stephanie and Professor Rozhen mentioned. Just only one thing. I believe the cultural context is itself is very important in storytelling. Um, to be active good listener and to motivate someone to tell the story is we have also to be aware about the culture, about the regional area, about what is going on in that area and with that culture, because cultural context is very important, and it has big role in our listening. And this is like really I have been through this experiences by for example, when some Yazidi survivors and they were when there were some international let's say interviewers or listeners around, and some Yazidi survivors, they were telling their stories, like using some words, some terms, referring to some specific colors, some words. Those international listeners, they were not aware how important, for example, this word for the Yazidi survivor is, or this color. One of the survivors, it might say, they forced me to wear blue. Maybe if someone is not familiar with the Yazidi culture, would think it's just like something normal, but they don't know. For example, for the Yazidi culture, blue is something, for example, not common or not allowed to be, especially within some families, to wear. So this is like forcing them to do something they are not willing to do. So these cultural contests and regional like let's say division different oh my god parts, there are so many so important.
Yeah, no, thank you. You all are incredible, amazing. Thank you for sharing the work you do, part of your stories. Everybody who's listening and who will listen after this, I know my takeaway is creating space, safe space, culturally educate ourselves on cultural context, and listen. The least we can do is listen to the stories of the survivors and create empathy and connect with one another. Storytelling is human currency. So you want to be richer as a human, engage with others. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for the incredible work you do. Let's engage on how we can help this work in order to prevent further genocides and support the ones who are still healing from it. Thanks for putting on this, everybody who organized this. We are grateful for each and every one of you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, Tabitha.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tabitha, and for the